What's up everyone? Today we are painting Colonel Stars and Stripes from Kick-Ass the board game. Now, I think I did a pretty darn good job on him. I am very happy with how he turned out, particularly that his eyes do not make him look like he is an insane person, even though he sort of is. But let's get down to the table and I'll show you how I did him. Alright, it's been a while since I recorded one of these, so let's see if I remember how to do it. Started out with a all-white primer for him. He's sort of singular in color, so starting with just pure white for his whole body worked really well. And then we go with Vallejo Model Color's Flat Flesh. He doesn't have a lot of flesh, he just has his chin, his forehead. But you also want to paint over the mask because that's going to help us create realistic looking eyes. Again, something that I was actually able to do for once. And I did also paint right around his wrist above his glove. There is a little tiny bit of skin showing there. Right, now I'm using Fairy Flesh. Any sort of lightened skin tone, you could also use like a white and brighten up your skin tone, but this is what is going to highlight the flesh on his face. I didn't highlight anything on the wrists. There wasn't really any point. By the time you've colored in the gloves and the jacket, barely any of that wrist skin is left. But I just went and did the cheeks and the chin. Just to bring it up a little bit. Now I'm taking Wolf Gray from Vallejo's Game Color. Any very light gray would work here. And I've mixed this into the highlighted color. The highlighted skin color. So this is not pure gray going onto his face. I also thinned it down very, very thin. To ensure that I didn't want to paint his face gray. I wanted there to be like a gray film over his face because we're trying to make like a 5 o'clock shadow. And so on the screen right now and under the light, it looks like I'm painting it on pretty thick, but I'm telling you right now, do not paint it on thick. I then added a little bit of the reddish flesh to the skin tone, and I zoomed in here so you can see. This is going to go on his lips. I kind of did this out of order. I would suggest you do this part here right after the base flesh. So you do the base flesh, or I used flat flesh, but whatever base tone you're using, then do the lips, then come back and start doing the highlight, and then do the 5 o'clock shadow here, because I did have to redo it to make the lips look right. But as you can see there with that 5 o'clock shadow on there, it looks excellent, at least I think so. So here I'm using ivory, and now I haven't done any kind of highlighting in the eye socket. What I wanted to do was make sure that I had my skin tone in there, then come back with the ivory to do the eyes. Now, even though they're obviously way too big, they're very sloppy, that's not the point. I then went back with black and painted in pupils. A trick that I was told by a friend at work who is an actual painter, like doesn't just paint miniatures, paints on canvas, and is excellent. Flat green is the color I'm using here. Is excellent, is that she said, as I'm trying to figure out how to control the size of the pupil, the best thing that I can do is make them a little too large and kind of put them like both on the right side. So the right side of the right eye and the right side of the left eye, as if the character is looking to the side. Then come back with my skin tones and shape them. And over time I'll learn how to control the size of the pupil, but in the meantime it won't make my character look like he has a lazy eye or something like that. And as you can see here, after putting that green on, he looks much better. The eyes actually look natural. So I use that flat green to color in the mask, and then I'm adding some ivory to the flat green just to lighten it up and brighten it and start to do the highlights. And we're highlighting it just as if it was a face. So above the eyes, the ridge of the eyes, on the ridge of the nose, and then I'm also going to line along the mask, the bottom and the top. I didn't want to risk messing up the eyes after I'd spent so much time and actually learned a way to make eyes that are presentable. I didn't want to go and highlight around the eyes and then accidentally get green in them and have to start all over. So I did it on the top and the bottom. Because remember, we're all in this together, we're all learning together, especially if you're watching my videos. You're probably not an expert painter, otherwise why are you watching me? I should be watching you. But if you're at the same level as me, we're all in this together, we're all learning. So you know the struggles of once you've done something right, you don't want to touch it anymore. Refractive green, this is a brownish green, it's a very, very deep green. And that is what is going to be the primary base tone for his uniform. So we're going to do a really cool technique, I'll call it, because the effect is pretty simple. And I think you could apply this in many different ways. So if you're doing army guys of any type of army, or you just want to do camouflage or like urban camo, I think this is a really easy way to do it. And it came out really good. So the first thing you want to do though is get a real solid base tone down. And that's why I wanted to start with white. I didn't want to have to deal with trying to put on a bunch of layers trying to get an even tone. I just wanted it to be an even tone. So I did 2 coats, of course, and got this real dark green here. Now I added some yellow ochre to the green. That is starting to move it into the yellowish tone, but it's still keeping that brown in there. So we're really still having this dark, it looks like canvas, the same way that army fatigues look. And so on the parts that are the brightest, of course I'm brightening up as I highlight. So on the arms as they're facing out, on the shoulders, on the lapels, and then each time I add a little bit more of that yellow ochre, I'm definitely not getting into the yellow spectrum. It's still very clearly green. It's just that this is an easy way to lighten that green without using white and turning it into light green. Now, if you've been watching me for a while, you know that I'm not really a fan of really pushing the highlights on most of my miniatures. I kind of like the more subtle tones, so I will highlight 5-6 layers worth of highlights, but they don't go in a very dramatic arc. They just sort of all kind of hang out near the same base tone. What I've learned though is that those don't look the best for pictures. So I think I will break out of my comfort zone and start highlighting higher as we go. Further on, you'll be seeing me pushing those highlights. I mean, I did it for like the Magenta Kafifi with Zombicide Green Horde, and like some of the other ones like that where they are cartoony and they're a little silly, so it is fine to push those highlights a ton. But with a character like this, where even though he actually literally is a cartoon, I don't want him to, like, I didn't want his fatigues to clash. I wanted them to sort of look natural. But to skip over all that, I highlighted all of the green first, and then now we're getting into camouflage. So what am I doing here? What I first did is I took my brush and I dipped it in the water and got just water, no paint, and I painted. You're gonna see me do it again here. So I did one arm. Now I'm doing it on the head here. I'm only taking one body part at a time. You want to take this nice and slow. And I just put water on. Then I'm using Vallejo Model Colors, I think it's pale yellow, and putting a little dot. The water will help it spread out and make it look like a very ununiform dot. If you were to just tap it with your brush, you would get basically a circle every time, or a smudge. This, as you can see as I've zoomed in here, gives you all varying sizes of dots. Then what I did is, there's no water on it now, it's dried. I'm going back with the same color, and any of the dots that kind of washed out too much and got a little bit too big, or just didn't get light enough, I'm coming and tapping a little bit extra paint onto them just to make sure that they stand out and you can tell that they're dots. But you could do this on a camouflage of any color. So if you started with a base green, you could do 3 or 4 different types of green. If you were doing an urban camo, you could start with gray and do blue and white. What I'm doing here is I'm coming back with some of my highlight color and I'm cleaning up anywhere where the dots ran. So because the water might have grabbed too much of it and then started to pool it into cracks and crevices, you have to go and clean them up a little bit. So I just came back in with the green and cleaned them up. Any of them that had gotten too big and too washed out or had any like little runners, I just fixed them up. So he's looking awesome already here. This is the Umbral Umber from P3, and that's what I'm going to use for all of his leather parts. He has straps around his waist. He has a long around each thigh. He also has a gun holster. And so those are the parts that you're going to want to make sure that you get with this color, and then we'll brighten it up to make it look like leather. But for right now, you really want a real dark brown color on there. You could do a black leather if you wanted to as well. It's pretty much the same process. Now on the back here, what I'm painting right now, I didn't know what that was, and I should have done the research first. I now know it is a baseball bat that he carries that has the American flag on it. You know, part of his name is Colonel Stars and Stripes. So I should have done the research on that. I didn't, so I paint it to look more like an axe. I still think that it comes out pretty good, and it's one of those things where you can take artistic liberties, especially on the back of a model, where you can make him stand out. And I put a little red in it, you'll see that in a second, that really makes the model pop and kind of breaks it up a little bit. Right here, all I'm doing is highlighting that leather. You've seen me do it 100 times the same way. You already intuitively know how to do it. Lighten up the color a little bit and come back. I found if you're going to use a really dark leather, in other words a really dark brown, one of the best things to do is just add white to it to start lightening it up a little bit at a time. You don't want to go too much, just a little bit at a time, and that helps to really highlight that leather and make it look like it's leather. I'm using khaki here to highlight the wood part of the bat that's on his back. Again, I thought it was an axe, so I was painting it to look like a wooden axe handle. But the khaki definitely breaks it up from the leather of his belt. Makes it look totally different. So here I'm using whole red. One of my favorite ways to paint red is to start with a base tone of whole red, which is a brownish red. Well, a reddish brown actually, because it's very brown with a little bit of red tone in it. This is a great way to get a very solid base coat, because if you have tried painting red on basically anything, red pigment is almost as difficult to paint as yellow. It just doesn't want to stick to anything. It sort of pools in spots and has a lot of streaks and things like that. So red is one of the more difficult colors I've found to work with, and painting a deep brown color underneath of it, it really makes it pop pretty easily. So you can see here I'm just painting the outside and the top, leaving the bottom and the right hand side in that whole brown color. So those are the shadowed areas, and then I just pick out a little bit of the edge to make sure that the edge is definitely the brightest of the colors. Here's Vallejo Model Color Black. I don't normally like to paint black with actual black, because black is always a little ashy. Some of the colors out there, some of the brands out there have blacks that are very, very deep, and if you use one of those, then go for it. But I have this bottle of black, and I'm trying to use it up as best I can. So so that I can go buy another black, but you know, for right now it works. So I painted his gloves and his boots. I'm now using Citadel's Mechanicus Standard Gray. I've moved them into separate droppers because the pots are terrible. There's plenty of videos online on how to do that. If you want me to show a video of how I do it, leave a comment below and I'll happily make a video, but I would want to make sure that everyone wants to see that first before I do it. Plus I would have to go buy some more because I've already done it with all my washes and all my Citadel paints. But I'm using that Mechanicus Standard Gray to highlight the black. So I'm mixing it into the black. It's not going on pure. That'd be much too large of a jump. It would be very glaring that there's gray on top of black, and it wouldn't look like a highlight. So this is pretty much the last highlight. This is the most amount of gray that I used. This is about a 50-50 mixture at this point of the Mechanicus Standard Gray, which is a steel dark gray mixed with black. And then I'm using pure Mechanicus Standard Gray here to paint the gun. So the gun, I kind of do it a little sloppy, and I apologize for this. I do fix it, but I thought that I was recording and I wasn't as I was fixing it. It was kind of in the inverse. When I messed it up and I stopped the camera, I thought I had paused the camera, so on and so forth. So what I've done is I painted it in Mechanicus Standard Gray, and then I come back with this wolf gray. And the wolf gray I'm using on all of the metal that is all over his belt. So he has like little buckles, and then he has some buttons up his jacket, and I'm hitting those with the wolf gray. And because they're so small, this bright gray makes it look as if they're shiny metal. But where I mess up was on the handgun. I put way too much on. Less is definitely more when you want it to just look like a shine, and I should have just put a little bit on the top. And actually what you'll see in the finished picture is it's much better because I went back, recoated it Mechanicus Standard Gray, and then came back and did less. But as you see, I'm painting right here. I left it in just to show like what part I'm talking about. But you'll see I start to kind of color it in with this wolf gray, and that is definitely not what you want to do. Yeah, see here I go. I start to color it in. You don't want to do that. You want to make very, very thin lines to just accent it. And as you can see there, they're back to thin lines. I think he looks so awesome. What do you guys think? Please leave a comment below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and definitely like the video. That lets me know that you like more of these. Also, let me know if you watched my Kick-Ass review, what you guys think about that. I'm going to paint up the rest of them, but who knows if anyone is going to watch them, considering this game did not do well. I'll see you all next time.